Today, I had a great conversation with Gagan Biyani, the CEO and co founder of Maven, a leading education marketplace. Gagan has had an exceptional career as the co founder of Udemy and at his previous company, Sprig. He lives in Oakland, California, where I live too, and he's closely involved in Empower Oakland, which is a volunteer led organization focused on common sense solutions to our city's most pressing challenges. You're really going to enjoy this conversation. I know you run a company and you're pretty like civically engaged within the Oakland community. What are some things that you like to do other than like your work life? What are some things you do for fun?
Many things. I love hiking. My wife and I go hiking probably in the once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something. I love going for long urban walks as well, just walking from my house to, walking around the neighborhood, checking out a new city, going to San Francisco. And I have lots of good friends in the neighborhood, so I like spending time with friends. We usually have a couple glasses of wine, or we might play a board game. And then we love cooking. So we cook a lot of meals at home and have really gotten into my grill recently, which has been fun.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really fun. Tell me more about your entrepreneurial journey, sort of like how your career's progressed.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area like you, but I wasn't lucky enough to know about tech or know anyone in it. My dad worked in startups, but I didn't know, he never really talked about work. So I honestly didn't know that you could go into entrepreneurship. So my journey started by accident. My parents split up when I was 13, and all of a sudden we were financially crunched. So I had a real interest in doing speech and debate, and I knew that it was expensive. It cost money to buy plane tickets, to pay for tournament fees, etc. So I decided I was going to earn money to help pay for some of those expenses. And I started a speech and debate camp with a couple friends. This camp ended up becoming quite big, and we ended up doing 10, 20, $30,000 of revenue in a summer. Um, and so it actually paid for all of our travel for the whole team, which was really amazing for some of our biggest tournaments. Um, and that made me realize that I really wanted to get into business instead of, for example, going to law or something else. Then I went to college, had no idea how to get into business. So I just did your basic thing. I was an economics major, in part because UC Berkeley has rejected me from the business school. So I couldn't get in. And so I did economics instead. And then I graduated, I went to Accenture and, you know, basically thought I was in business. I thought that was going to be my career. I'd work for a company like Accenture, maybe I'd go to a Microsoft or an Amazon, etc. I had no idea that startups existed. I had no idea that as a 21-year-old I could start a company. But luckily for me, I got really bored at Accenture and started to look at other things to do. I was also worried that they were gonna do a layoff because this was during a very bad time in the economy, the 2008 great financial crisis. So as that was all happening, I was nervous. I was like, am I going to get laid off? So I started looking for other career opportunities, and I happened to find TechCrunch, which in the 2008 to 2012 era was essentially the number one resource that everybody read. People didn't go on Twitter to get tech news, they went on TechCrunch. And there were no other competing sites that people were really paying attention to. So that it was really a nexus of information about what was going on in the startup industry. Now there's hundreds of places you get information from, but back then there was really only one that was like TechCrunch. And so I ended up obsessing over tech and learning as much as possible and reading like hundreds of articles a week. I'd read every article on TechCrunch, then I'd read every article on Mobile Crunch, and then sometimes I'd even read like TechCrunch EU, or I'd link out to another article and read people's websites, and it's just obsessed. And luckily, during that time, I found out that people like me, young, ambitious people, actually sometimes did quit their jobs and start companies. And I enrolled in a few different incubator programs and events and stuff, and started to meet people. And eventually, I found these two Turkish immigrants who were starting this company called Udemy. And I asked them if I could help them out. I helped them out for free for 4 or 5 months. And then eventually we decided to co-found the company together.
That's great to hear. Were you a policy or LD debater?
I was an LD debater.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Did you debate at UC Berkeley?
I did not debate in college. Once I got to college, I decided that I wanted to have a different sort of set of experiences. And so I decided not to join the debate team.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I have a lot of friends who I debate with in high school, but then they go on to college and just switch up their activities. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Did your parents immigrate here from India or were they born in America?
They both immigrated from India at the time of marriage. So they had an arranged marriage. They're both Rajasthani. So my parents grew up in um, Delhi and in Udaipur and Jaipur and towns around the Rajasthan region. Um, and once they got married, my dad came here, got his master's degree, and as soon as he got his H-1B visa, he then brought my mom over.
What's like a family tradition that your parents insisted on you based on their culture growing up in India that you kind of hated, but now growing up, you kind of look back and you're like, I like this.
Well, we went to temple pretty regularly as kids for certain years, and then certain years we just completely ignored it and never went. And I'm really glad that I have some connection to the Hindu religion. I'm not personally religious. I don't practice regularly. I do celebrate Diwali religiously, aka every single year we go and meet as a family together for Diwali. But for other things, I don't tend to go to temple very often. But I'm so glad that I did when I was a kid, at least a few times, because I feel very connected spiritually and philosophically to the Indian religion, specific, obviously Hinduism.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I also personally relate to that a lot. I'm not very religious, but I'll still participate in a lot of the traditions and I still love the culture a lot. I guess what's the most awkward, speaking about culture, what's the most awkward cultural misunderstanding that you've experienced that you can laugh about now, or something that your non-Indian friends would find fascinating or surprising when they visit your house?
Such a great question because there's an immediate thing that comes to mind, which is like when you enter an Indian household, they will immediately serve you food and then they won't stop adding food to your plate. So I used to have friends come over and they would like sit down at our table to eat and my mom would just keep serving them food and they didn't know how to say no because most, not all cultures, but a lot of other non-Indian cultures you don't have to say no. You actually are asked a question and then you say yes, but you weren't expected to just say no on your own. And in Indian culture, it's totally the opposite. Like if you don't say no proactively, people are just going to keep giving you food nonstop. And
Yeah.
so that was always really funny to watch my friends just sort of struggle through their fourth plate of whatever my mom was serving that day. And finally, my mom and I would be like, okay, we can stop torturing them and we'll tell them, hey, you can actually stop now if you don't want to keep eating.
Yeah. I guess what's the most like stereotypically American thing you love doing, and then the most stereotypically Indian thing that like you couldn't live without?
Well, my wife is American from Ohio and her family's in Pennsylvania. So she has roots back to the Mayflower or something like that. And as a result of that, I love Christmas. I like think Christmas is one of the greatest American traditions out there. I spend every Christmas in Pennsylvania with her family, with her extended family. There's like 15 people and 150 to 200 gifts on the trees. There's like three different trees. There's three different real trees, and there's tons of Christmas decorations everywhere. And we all just eat and cook and watch TV and play games, do puzzles. It's super fun. And I'm really glad that my wife sort of puts a line in the sand and says every single year we have to go to Pennsylvania to do Christmas with her family. Then for an Indian tradition, I mean, I do love Diwali, but I'd say that for me, Indian weddings, I love weddings. I love going to weddings. I actually heard a podcast the other day where someone was like, I never attend weddings. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe you would not want to attend weddings. Like, they're so much fun. I get to see all my friends in one place, hang out with family, just be merry. They last 3 or 4 days, so you feel like you really get a full experience. And so I love Indian weddings.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I guess like me personally, there's not many Indian American people around me, so not many people who share my culture, like my friends, kids at my school, etc. So I kind of, it's sometimes like a two worlds type of thing, like a world when I'm home and then a world when I'm outside the house. And I've tried to merge that. I know you mentioned you did LD debate. I've actually tried to merge it by talking about South Asian critical theory and policy debate and like reading like K arguments that are a lot related to Indianness. So I guess what's a time that you felt caught between two worlds and how'd you kind of navigate that?
Well, I always feel caught between two worlds because my personality is inherently, uh, very Indian. At the same time, I was raised and sound very American, and I have plenty of American traits. So at work, it can be very interesting to have to navigate a more American vibe, right? Like I said about saying no, like Indian people are super direct. You walk in the house and your mom will tell you, like, you look fat today, or like you haven't eaten enough, or you got a B+ in math, like what's wrong with you? It's a super, super direct culture. And so I grew up thinking that was normal. I had a lot of Indian American friends. And then all of a sudden I got to the work world, and I got away with that in school because our teachers were used to Indian kids, and I sort of grew up in a different type of demographic than it sounds like you did. Then I got to the work world, and all of a sudden everyone was just like, dude, you're such an asshole. Like you're too direct, basically. And I really struggled to balance out my Indianness at work. And even to this day, I find that I always have to, people call it like, I don't know if this is what qualifies as code switching or if it's just like cultural integration or whatever, but I feel like I'm constantly editing myself in my head to be more polite, more kind, more nice. And there's a presumption that that's a good thing, when in my opinion, it's actually as bad as it is good. It's just different. Being direct is a gift to the person you're talking to because you're honest and clear and you're fair to them and you're not hiding anything. Whereas being nice and polite is a gift to the person you're talking to because it's warmer and it makes it easier for them to hear things, etc. So they both have their merits. And I've always had trouble balancing those two things.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. So essentially, like sort of having to mask inherent parts of your identity when you're presenting yourself to the outside world in order to avoid judgment or like things like being brutally honest or like looked down upon by like your colleagues and peers. I guess so. In terms of that, in terms of like downplaying your identity, what do you think is like the craziest thing you've ever done to hide or downplay your Indianness? And like, how do you feel about that now?
Well, just to be clear, I don't think I have to downplay my Indianness. I'm very lucky. I live in the East Bay of California. I work in tech where people are allowed to sort of be Indian. So it's less downplaying the more overt Indian nature of myself, right? Like I make jokes about being Indian and I feel very, very comfortable and have for most of my life been very lucky. I went to UC Berkeley, which is, very diverse. Growing up in California, we just have the best of this environment. On the flip side, I think all of the things that are cultural are harder for people because they don't really understand that they think that these types of things are just a given. Things like how you're polite, how you interact with people. You know, I was never taught that you should wait for other people at the dinner table to get their food. I always was just taught just eat when the food's arrived. It's hot. And so there are some cultural nuances that I have to navigate, but I actually don't really feel like I have to hide my Indianness very much.
No, yeah, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So I guess in terms of the nuanced aspects of Indian culture, if you could cast a spell on the world and magically help every American understand one thing about Indian culture that would change their perspective a little bit, like what would that be?
Yeah, I think this combination of like caring about education and caring about success, balanced with a very sort of, Zen, I'll call it Zen Buddhist, but it's obviously it comes from Hinduism, like feeling of enlightenment and trying to be good. And it's an interesting combination because most people assume that people who are trying to be successful are inherently very self-centered or they're very aggressive, etc. And I think one thing I'd love for people to see is that there's a positive sum way to look at success. And Indian culture really teaches you that. Indian culture doesn't make it seem like if you're successful, someone else is unsuccessful. They teach you that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps by educating yourself and then going and doing things in the world. And I love that mentality of Indian culture and the hustle dynamics of teaching, I come from a long line of small business owners who started their own little businesses and eventually made, enough money to feed their families and buy homes and all of that. And we didn't grow up with that kind of money. And so I'm really proud of that. And I wish that more people understood that that is really possible because I think there are many parts of America where people could adopt a more education and work forward dynamic, and that might help some people out there. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who already have that, but there's probably others who could learn a lot from Indian culture and how we are taught as kids.
No, yeah, that makes sense. You basically just summarized the point of this podcast, which is actually to show that while Indian people may be troped as different through things like social media and other platforms, a lot of our culture still represents the same values and dreams and aspirations that America stands for and that America is built on is kind of the message trying to be sent out. But I guess in a more like lighthearted manner, what misconception about Indian Americans makes you like laugh the most and why is it so ridiculous?
You know, everyone assumes that all Indian people are smart. And I think that that's actually really funny because when you go to India, you realize that there are plenty of every level of intelligence people in India. It's just that we have a very, very strict immigration system in the United States and particularly targeted highly, highly educated Indian people to immigrate into the United States. And as a result, the Indian people in the United States happen to be super well educated and honestly, I think very intelligent overall. And there's a bunch of like statistics that back this up. But when you go to India, people are normal. There's people there who have every type of, level of economic success, intelligence. There are people who are morally, there are people with good morals, people with bad morals. It's a diverse place, and I think it would be nice for people to realize that. And candidly, I think Indian people in America should realize that because I think Indian people in America also act and get frustrated. And this is sort of in response to some of your questions. I just want you to know, or want you to hear my perspective, which is I feel like in India, in America, we expect Americans to do a lot more than Indians do for Americans when Americans are in India. It's like if an American person goes to India and their name is Jacqueline, for example, like there is no way that an Indian person is going to be able to pronounce that name correctly. But here in America, we get really frustrated when someone cannot pronounce our name correctly. And I would just say, hey, like, I actually don't think that we are very lucky in America to live in a place that basically allows and has the standards of equality that we have. Now, we have a long way to go, and there's plenty of things that we could improve. But I mean, geez, if you go to India, you will not, as a white, black, Asian, whatever, anything other than Indian, even if you come as a Pakistani person, right? And you look very similar, but you're different, you will be treated much more differently by Indian people than you are, at least in California and America, are as an Indian person who's very, very different from the local culture. So I actually think that I wish more Americans didn't put as much pressure on themselves to try to be the perfect version of accepting, because I think that actually creates a lot of negative consequences. And I wish that we just accepted more naturally. I think America is a naturally very accepting place. I love it. I feel like the immigrant experience has been really positive for me. And I wish that people just took it with a little more grace. Like you don't have to beat yourself up over it. Like people in India are not going to be super amenable to other races either. And I love that Americans are trying, and that's really amazing to me. So I don't expect the world, but I do fight for continuing to keep people aware and share my story. I'm trying to do that in a way that is not frustrated or expecting too much without looking in the mirror and realizing that, pretty much in India, you can't get the level of acceptance for non-Indians that you do here in America.
No, yeah, and you've shared your story perfectly. I guess to your first point about setting the best of the best to America, I do agree with you on that. I think that's also one of the main contributing factors to like the model minority myth that also occurs with like Japanese, Chinese people, just like a lot of Asian people is that they're only going to send the top 0.1% to America. So that's kind of going to define what the culture is. And that's going to paint the narrative of how these people are. Whereas this is just a tiny share, a tiny pool of people who were lucky enough to come here and worked hard enough to come here. And they're sort of representing the entire culture, which I don't think should be what's happening. And yeah, to your second point, I actually agree a lot. I think that people need to be a little bit more chill with this stuff. Like I think everyone's getting a little bit very sensitive with we need to like we need to over adapt to someone's culture. Whereas it's like I when people mispronounce my name, which happens a lot, I don't necessarily get super offended. I don't get offended. I'll just be like, I'll correct them. And it's like, yeah, it's fine. Like if I was in your shoes, I probably would not. Like there's like 1,000 names I probably can't pronounce. So it's like I totally get that.
I have an anglicized version of my name. My name is Gagan Biyani, and uh, but even myself, like when I'm speaking English, it's very hard to pronounce my name correctly because you're basically like changing languages in the mid sentence. And so when I introduce myself, I say Gagan, and I prefer people to say Gagan because I realized as a kid, and this isn't a good thing that happened in the 90s, but people would always mispronounce my name as like Gagan or Gagan, and I didn't like either of those at all. And so I was like, no, 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 I'm just going to make my name Goggin. I'm going to accept that it's going to be anglicized because people here speak English and they don't have the accent or the pronunciation to say my name the way that I would like to hear it if it was being tried to pronounce correctly. Gagan is not easy. So when they say that, it just sounds weird to me. And I don't like the way Americans say Gagan. So even my wife calls me Gagan, and I've never tried to teach her the other version because in my mind that'd be like trying to teach her how to speak Hindi. And well, that's not something I expect of her anytime soon. Maybe one day she can learn, but I don't know if she'll ever want to or if I'll ever want her to.
No, yeah, same. My name is correctly pronounced as Shub. A lot of people get it wrong and say Shub. So I just make it Shub and I tell people Shub. When someone pronounces my name correctly, I'll actually look at them twice and I'll be like, wait, like I'll get a little like thrown off because I'll be like, did you just do that right? Like that's kind of crazy. So yeah, totally. I think people need to take everything with a little bit more light. That's mainly why I don't want these conversations to be like preachy or negative. Just to the point is to share the stories of someone and like you can kind of take what you want from it and you can there's a bunch of stories and information being thrown at you. You can sort of choose what to learn.
I love
um
that, man. It's great.
yeah.
Also, I didn't even know how to pronounce your name exactly. So, and I speak like I used to speak fluent Hindi, but I just hadn't seen that exact spelling of that name before. So, Shub Doshi, is that right?
Yeah. I guess like so you did speak fluent Hindi.
At one point in my life, I don't anymore, but I still
Okay,
I still can get by.
this is I have a fun question for you. So if your life were to have a soundtrack, what Indian song and then what American song would be playing during the key moments of your lifetime?
I'm horrible at music, so this is not a great question for me. I guess I guess that for an Indian song, the song I'm thinking of is Mohabbatein. Wait, no, 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 sorry, Mukabala. Whoops. Um, because that was like one of my favorite songs growing up. And then I'll take another song from when I was growing up. I really loved what's the song? I really loved, I need to think of a good one here. Um, well, right now, recently, I guess I'll pick one recently. Don't Think Twice, It's All Right by Bob Dylan has been something I've been playing a lot recently after the movie came out about Bob Dylan. So those are my two songs.
Yeah, great. I've never heard Bob Dylan before, but I've heard of him. Is that rock music or?
Folk music from I think like the 70s and mostly 80s, mostly 80s.
Yeah. Wait, so tell me about that camp you started. Was it like you're coaching like middle schoolers going into high school, or is it like a summer like intensive or yeah,
Yeah,
kind of like how did that work?
it was a 2 to 3 week summer camp. We offered a third week for people who wanted to. It was in person in a local like elementary school or high school. So you would go for, it's just a day camp, from, I don't know, 9 o'clock to 3 p.m. or something like that. And we would teach Lincoln Douglas policy and speech to incoming high school students and some existing high school students as well. And we
Yeah,
charged
that's really
like
cool.
at that time, I think the tuition was like $250. And so parents kind of used it as a way to, send their kids into something interesting over the summer, something intellectual. We obviously got a lot of Asian kids who were coming, but we had all types of kids. And then it would also kind of be like cheap babysitting, honestly, because they could just drop their kids off and we'd take care of it for an entire 2 week period, 5 days a week. So it was nice.
So I'm gonna guess, is it San Jose or Fremont where you grew up?
Fremont.
Fremont?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to Mission San Jose, so some people think it's in
Oh,
San Jose, but it's actually in Fremont.
yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I thought it was in San Jose too.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
common. I mean, the name, it's in the name Mission San Jose, but it's because somehow the boundaries of where Fremont is include the mission, the Spanish mission that was created in the 16, 1700s by the Spanish people when they came and conquered California. So the Spanish mission is actually not too far from my house, and you can still visit it today, which is pretty cool.
yeah, I'll go check that out next time I'm in the area. But I guess sort of to wrap things up, if you could have like if you could sit down for coffee with your junior year in high school self, what would be the main takeaway you would want him to have?
I was very stressed junior year. I was worried about college. I was worried about all sorts of personal stuff, just going through a lot. So I would give my junior year self a little bit of grace and tell him things turn out pretty well. Chill out a little bit. Enjoy it. Don't beat yourself up too much, and you're gonna get through all of this.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you for answering all these questions. I really loved your perspective on not just like how it is as an Indian American in the U.S., but also how you feel about the different tropes that are put onto Indian Americans. And everything you said was honestly very insightful. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad you're doing this. It's fun to see. As you know, when I was younger, I did a lot of entrepreneurial things, and doing a podcast and interviewing people is on very entrepreneurial, and I love seeing that. So I hope you stick with it and do it as long as it serves you, and then learn from it no matter what. But I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, Chubb.